Discover the incredible transformative secrets of Egyptian mythology, 5 amazing truths revealed. Emily sat on her bed, the rhythmic patter of rain against the window muffling the noise of the bustling city outside. In her small, cramped apartment, surrounded by boxes of forgotten dreams, she felt an almost overwhelming sense of isolation. A knock broke the silence, sharp and unexpected, resonating deep within her. She opened the door to find a dusty box marked with her grandfather's initials. An odd mixture of excitement and dread unfurled in her chest. Was this a forgotten legacy or just another weight on her weary soul? Inside the box were remnants of his passion for Egyptian mythology, scrolls filled with intricate hieroglyphics, artifacts that whispered tales of resilience and power. Trembling, she traced her fingers over the dusty surfaces, feeling their history leap into her mind. Yet, even as she marveled at these discoveries, her heart weighed heavy with the looming threat of budget cuts hovering over her art program. The fiery spark of creation she nurtured in her students felt increasingly like a flickering candle in a torrential storm. How could she fight for them when even her own spirit felt trapped in the suffocating necessity of standardized goals? A flurry of doubts swirled around her mind like the chaotic energy of the middle schoolers she adored yet feared losing. Would they be silenced by a system that cherished numbers over narratives? Her chest tightened as she fought against memories of blank stares during her classes when confronted with the reality of their lives, their stories that deserve to be told. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Pushing deeper into her grandfather's journals, she unearthed tales of his struggles against biases as he sought to share knowledge so often dismissed. His voice was engulfed by a system that resisted change. The realization gnawed at her, a clarity intertwining dread and determination. Had the same barriers confined her life? Could she break free and carve a path for her students, or would the board members' threat wrap its ownership tighter, smothering her purpose? As the exhibition day loomed closer, her internal war raged. Heart racing, she envisioned their work displayed alongside ancient artifacts, bearing witness to lives intertwined, each brushstroke a rebellion against conformity. The notion of standing firm against the financial powers swirling in her school tested every ounce of her fortitude. Her hands shook with both fear and exhilaration. This was more than art, it was a fight against a suffocating silence. Yet even now, as her resolve grew, the insidious fear clawed at her heart. Would the exhibition be a declaration of her legacy, or a moment in time extinguished before it could catch fire? The thunder outside rumbled, echoing her own tumultuous thoughts, as a chilling message from the board member hung in the air, threatening to render her efforts meaningless. With everything at stake hanging by a thread, Emily had to ask herself, how far would she truly go to keep this light alive? Would she dare risk everything for the very art and students she fought to uplift? The tension tightened with each breath, and feelings of despair clawed fiercely at her, leaving her desperate for answers. Emily closed the box, her fingers shaking with a mixture of adrenaline and uncertainty. The echoes of her grandfather's struggles reverberated through her mind, tethering her to the powerful realization that she was not alone in this fight. Each story she unearthed fueled an urgency within her, igniting a passion she feared was dwindling. She had seen too many bright-eyed students extinguished by the apathy of the system, and now she felt an intense responsibility to be their voice. Moments later, the rain drummed harder against the window, almost like the cadence of her racing heart, urging her toward action. Fear gripped her like a vice, she could feel it constricting her breath. But somewhere, deep down, a flicker of determination ignited. What if her grandfather's legacy could be an anchor, a source of strength to push back against the threatening wave of conformity? The next day, as she stepped into the art room, Emily was energized. The bright walls that had once seemed bland now sparkled with possibility. Today, she announced, an edge of fervor in her voice, we're embarking on a journey into the stories behind our artwork, just like the ones my grandfather shared in his journals. Her students' eyes widened with excitement, sparked by the promise of discovery. She could already feel their energy shifting, a collective curiosity blossoming as she introduced them to the richness of storytelling through art, yet, the shadow of the budget cuts loomed. The whispers of the board member echoed in her mind, sowing seeds of doubt. Every lesson she created felt like a tightrope walk. One misstep could send her tumbling into a fate already laid out by the system. But as she glanced around at her students, feverishly responding to the experience she was crafting, a wave of conviction surged through her. They deserved more than the limitations imposed upon them. After school, she found herself at the library, poring over the texts of Egyptian mythology that her grandfather had cherished. The rich narratives of gods and goddesses battling for balance resonated deeply with her circumstances. She scribbled notes, piecing together a lesson plan that merged their struggles with the art she hoped to display. Each myth became a pillar, reinforcing her stand against the bleak reality she fought daily. The transformative power of these stories was not lost on her. It was like a rallying cry urging her forward. That night, she slid into bed, clutching her notes, heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. How could she bring this vision to life while still navigating the impending cuts? The weight pressed heavily upon her chest, and yet, each deep breath filled her with resolve. She resolved not to retreat. What if she could create a narrative for not just her students, but for herself as well? A story that showcased resilience, creativity, and the thunderous might of voices once silenced. Days turned to weeks as Emily meticulously prepared for the exhibition, balancing two worlds: her foundational beliefs in art education and the stifling, cold bureaucracy of the board. Every interaction with her students showed her how deeply they resonated with the stories she'd shared. Their art began to reflect a newfound sense of agency, each creation a testament to their voices struggling to be heard. But as the opening night approached, an unexpected email from the board member pushed her to the brink of despair. Budget meetings were imminent, and rumors pointed toward a definitive cut that could dismantle her program entirely. The implications clawed at her resolve, dimming her hard-won clarity. That night, she stood in front of the mirror, considering the gravity of her situation. Choices loomed colossal before her. Was a legacy of silence inevitable? As she turned away from her own reflection, adrenaline surged through her as she crafted her plan. The time had come to confront her fears head-on, seeking support beyond the walls of her classroom. But would she find the courage to challenge the very forces threatening her students' futures? Or would this become another haunting echo of dreams unfulfilled? With every heartbeat echoing like a drum, she prepared to step into a confrontation that would test her very spirit. The storm within her only grew stronger, swirling toward a moment of truth. Emily sat at her cluttered desk, a fortress of papers towering around her, each page filled with thoughts and plans that swung between desperation and determination. The looming budget cuts were like a chilling specter, casting shadows over the vibrant visions she had meticulously crafted for her students. With each tick of the clock, another wave of anxiety threatened to crash over her, but she refused to let it drown her spirit. As she flipped through her grandfather's notes on Egyptian mythology, she felt a surge of inspiration wash over her. The myths told stories of struggle, of gods overcoming chaos, of light wresting dominion from the darkness. This wasn't just literature to her, it was a lifeline. In those narratives, she found not only motivation but also a blueprint for her next steps. Each tale mirrored her own battle against the systemic apathy she faced as an educator. Ankh, she whispered to herself, the symbol of life repeating in her thoughts, reminding her that education was a living, breathing force. She had to breathe that life into her upcoming meeting with the board. This was not just an administrative necessity, it was a chance to redefine the conversation, to advocate for her students fiercely. Days passed, filled with late-night preparations as she crafted not only a presentation but also an impassioned speech. She rehearsed it in front of the mirror, honing her tone, making it more assertive as she let the urgency of her message fill her. Art isn't just a subject, it's a lifeline. It's a space where students learn to express, explore, and expand their identities. Cut this program, and you cut their voices. On the eve of the board meeting, Emily felt another swell of emotion surge within her. Fear mingled with fierce pride. The faces of her students filled her mind, their laughter, their art, their defiance against the limitations placed upon them. They were her purpose. Every brushstroke they made was a challenge to the forces that sought to silence them. The meeting day arrived. As she entered the cold, sterile conference room, a sense of foreboding crept into her gut. She was greeted by a line of stern faces, each seemingly set on rejecting her vision. The word budget echoed ominously. Emily's heart raced, but as she took a breath, the memory of her grandfather's words enveloped her. There are stories worth telling, even against all odds, he had taught her. She recalled the strong, vibrant colors of her students' artwork, colors that spoke of their struggles and triumphs. She opened her presentation with a video montage that captured their journeys, creations born from raw emotion and bold declarations. Each clip became a story, weaving through context of art's profound impact on their lives. A silence fell over the room as the video concluded. Emily seized the moment. She spoke not just about the educational values or even the budget but the very necessity of giving students a voice. Turning to her audience, she allowed a moment of vulnerability. Imagine if you were told your words don't matter, your art isn't worth it. That's what these cuts will do. My students deserve to be seen and heard. She noticed a shift, subtle but present, in the expressions around her. The discussion that followed was less about cuts and more about solutions. The words, community, and resilience floated into the conversation. For the first time, she found allies amidst the bureaucratic masks that once intimidated her, but as the conversation began to flow toward a potential compromise, Emily felt a gnawing sense of urgency settle in her bones. They were discussing solutions, but was it enough? Would they really support the students or merely offer a band-aid fix? As the meeting adjourned, a wave of mixed emotions washed over her, hope fused with lingering doubts. Had she done enough, or merely ignited a flicker that could be snuffed out? In that moment, she realized that her journey was far from over. Emily had opened a door, but she had to step through it, demonstrating that the fight for art and expression was ongoing. As she stepped out into the crisp evening air, a lingering question flashed through her mind, igniting the next spark of determination: could she mobilize her students to advocate for their future? The challenge lay ahead, beckoning her to harness their collective voices before that flicker faded entirely. The days following the board meeting were a whirlwind. Emily felt buoyed by the small victories, yet the pulse of anxiety never fully abated. Each time she closed her eyes, she replayed the discussions, haunted by what had gone unsaid or left unresolved. The weight of it all pressed down on her chest, but with renewed clarity came the determination to act. Emily began mapping out her next steps. This time, the focus would not be solely on bureaucratic negotiations but on truly involving her students in the fight for their voices. She envisioned workshops where they could articulate their needs, experiences, and aspirations. Empowering them to take ownership of their narrative could shift the conversation from one of defensiveness to one of collaboration. Returning to her classroom, she was greeted by the familiar chaos of paints and sketches, a chaotic sanctuary that breathed life into her resolve. "Okay, everyone," she said, her voice steady but charged with anticipation. "We need to talk. It's time to not just defend our art program but to show the world how powerful our art really is." Students blinked at her, a mixture of confusion and curiosity washing over their faces. Emily took a deep breath, then recounted the essence of her meeting. "I showed them your work, but they need to hear from you. Your stories, your struggles, what art means to you. It's your voice that will make the difference." She watched as the fabric of uncertainty began to shift, threads of eagerness slowly intertwining with doubt. In the forthcoming weeks, they engaged in projects that explored their identities and experiences through art pieces that encapsulated their truths. Emily felt sparks of creativity that had been dormant not only ignite in her students but in herself as well. For the first time, she allowed the vulnerability of sharing her own artistic journey, her fears about the future, and the sheer power of expression to flow forth. This openness, she realized, was a risk. Could she really breach this boundary? But it was a risk that felt necessary. Authenticity could light a fire. Each mural painted, every poem written became a testament not just to individual struggles but to the collective power they could wield. Words began to spread. First, they reached the other classrooms, then the local community. Every moment was like nurturing a flickering ember. The potential for something monumental to arise was palpable, but as their efforts began to unfold into a cohesive voice, Emily grew increasingly aware of the inevitable pushback from the board. They had fueled this creative rebellion, but would they embrace it? Emails poured in from parents, praising the renewed spirit of the students. And yet, in her quiet moments, Emily laced her fingers together, a habit she adopted when thoughts turned against her. The reality of the budget lingered ominously above their heads like a dark cloud ready to burst. There were nights when doubts would creep in, especially during solitary drives home. Had she awakened something too wild? Was she setting her students up for disappointment? Then she remembered the way they looked, eyes alight with confidence, as they discussed their latest creations. It sparked a flicker of hope, grounding her point one evening, as Emily coaxed the final brushstrokes onto a mural that depicted the strength and colors of her students. A thought gripped her. What if their creations served as a physical representation of their plea? A form of visual advocacy that simply could not be ignored. With a newfound sense of purpose, Emily set her focus on an idea that took root in her mind. Could this collaborative art piece become their declaration? Their battle cry against the forces that sought to silence them? The planning began, but a vision loomed larger than she had anticipated. As she prepared for the unveiling of the mural, anticipation mixed with anxiety coursed through her veins. There would be no turning back. It was a commitment not just to her students but to herself and the artistry that flowed through their collective narratives. The day of the mural unveiling approached, and with it, the question tightened in Emily's throat: would they gather the strength to defend their voices? As her students made final touches, Emily knew this was only the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead, and as she stood back to admire their work, the bleak reality settled in again. Was the board truly ready to listen? Emily stood before the mural, a gallery of vibrant emotions woven into paint and brushstrokes. Yet beneath the surface of pride swirled the undertow of dread. The board meeting loomed, where her students' artistic voices would have to stand unflinchingly before the decision-makers. How would they perceive this bold manifesto? Would it resonate, or simply incite further resistance? As she watched her students' hands tremble slightly with excitement, a realization hit her: preparation was key. The day before the unveiling, she called an impromptu meeting, gathering them in the main hall. It was time to equip them not just with art but with the narratives that surrounded their creations. "Listen, you've poured your hearts into this," Emily began, her voice echoing softly against freshly painted walls. "But it's not just about the art. You need to be ready to speak your truths. What drove you to create this? How did it feel?" While some students nodded and murmured affirmations, others shifted uneasily, eyes darting. Emily recognized that sharing their stories wouldn't come easily for everyone. Still, she pressed on. "I want you to think about specific moments in your life that shaped these pieces. When you speak, let that passion flow." In the days that followed, they practiced articulating their ideas, each rehearsal peeling back layers of self-doubt. Emily witnessed shifts in their confidence. Their voices grew steadier, their eyes brighter. The girl who had once hesitated to share her poem now recited it with a fierce intensity, laced with the grit of her experience. Yet as Emily navigated this newfound energy of empowerment within her students, she grappled with her own insecurities. Could she truly accompany them into the boardroom, advocate for their voices, and challenge the established norms that loomed over them like an unyielding shadow? But she pushed those thoughts aside, channeling anxiety into action. The day before the unveiling, she spent the evening synchronizing her notes and thoughts into a cohesive argument. This wasn't just about the art program, it was an assertion of identity, a demand for recognition. Doubts about her capability to lead felt less haunting now that the commitment to her students felt greater than her fear. On the morning of the unveiling, Emily donned her best blazer and armor of sorts as she entered the meeting hall filled with board members, their expressions schooled into neutrality. Anxiety wove itself tightly around her thoughts. How would they receive her students? Would they even bother to listen? As the students introduced the mural, their voices rang with authenticity, layers of vulnerability and strength mixing into an impact that filled the room. One by one, they revealed their narratives, the connections between their lives and their art undeniable. Slowly, skepticism etched in the board members' faces began to ebb, replaced by curiosity, then deeper contemplation. However, just as Emily began to feel the tide shift, a board member interjected with skepticism. "While we appreciate the creativity on display, how do you expect this to contribute to our budget considerations?" Her heart sank as a familiar wave of doubt began to rise again. This was at the moment that could fracture their progress or propel them into uncharted territory. To appease their challenges while standing firm on their truths required a delicate balance. Underneath the pressure, Emily felt a spark in the silence. This was her moment to break through the resistance. Could she articulate a path forward where art and budgeting collided in a constructive manner? Before the meeting could descend into the usual state of backs against the wall, Emily gripped the podium. The question lingered in the air, and it echoed deeply, demanding a response, one that would lead her steadfastly into the depths of advocacy and challenge the established restraints. In that charged space, she took a breath, poised to confront not only the board members but her own limitations. The answer she was about to give could reshape everything that was about to unfold. Would she harness the power of her students' voices to rewrite the narrative? "Let me show you how this art becomes a financial bridge rather than a budgetary burden." As she launched into her pitch, an unfamiliar sense of determination enveloped her. The stakes had never felt higher. Would her words be powerful enough to change their perspective, to ignite a shift in thinking? Would her conviction spark a new awakening within the board? The moment of truth approached, and as eyes turned sharply to her, Emily realized she stood not just in defense of her students' program but for her own burgeoning identity as an advocate for transformation. Emily spoke deliberately, grounding her argument in facts that tied art to fiscal responsibility. "We're not merely creating art, we're investing in the potential of these students. Art enhances critical thinking, nurtures collaboration, and instills empathy, qualities that drive school success. Programs like this can transform not only individuals but the entire school ethos." As her voice grew stronger, board members exchanged glances, intrigue flickering in their eyes. Encouraged by their reactions, she elaborated on how the mural project had sparked interest in the local community, drawing attention they could harness for fundraising initiatives. Each startling narrative shared by her students now served as a bridge to financial viability. However, as Emily gained momentum, a niggling doubt crept back in. Would they truly see her vision, or were they simply humoring her? She had positioned herself in a precarious place, balancing on the edge between hope and despair, the outcome of her effort teetering on a knife's edge. Then came another question from a board member, cutting sharply through her fervor. What if art doesn't equate to financial results? Couldn't those resources be allocated to more practical subjects? A heaviness weighed on her chest as she considered this. The dismissal of creativity felt like a personal affront. It was as if they were questioning the very identities of her students. Yet, rather than shrink back, she leaned in, acutely aware of the weight of her responsibility in this defining moment. In a world increasingly driven by technology, she began, voice steadier than she felt, "We must foster creativity, adaptability, skills that will prepare our children for a future we can hardly envision. Art is not just an extracurricular, it's an essential component of a comprehensive education." Some members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and while Emily couldn't discern their thoughts, she sensed their resistance lose some ground. Perhaps her conviction held enough power to traverse their skepticism. But as doubts resurfaced, she determined to fortify her stance with passion. She recalled her students' poignant stories, the pain and triumph painted on the mural. They had fought against rejection, marginalization, and self-doubt, transforming their struggles into masterpieces. Could she express that raw poignancy in a way that resonated with the board? Emily's heart raced as she gathered her thoughts. "I show up here for them," she thought fiercely. "I can fight for this." She felt the urgency envelop her, driving her speech as she glanced at her students visible in the back, full of anticipation and hope. In that instant, she knew she must project their bravery. Art is the very essence of our humanity. It's the manifestation of voices that refuse to be silenced. Investing in this program isn't just about numbers, it's about tangible change in our students' lives. Letting them down means an unthinkable loss of potential. You have the power to make a choice today. The silence that followed was thick with anticipation. She had laid herself bare, both professionally and emotionally. Some board members shifted again, engaged in hushed discussions, while Emily's heart thudded a furious rhythm, her fate resting in their hands, but even as she fought to maintain her composure, uncertainty remained coiled tightly in her chest. Had she done enough? As the seconds dragged, she sought the looks on their faces, craving affirmation but fearing rejection. Then, a new voice spoke up, one she hadn't anticipated. A board member who had previously seemed disengaged leaned forward. What if we considered a pilot program? It could demonstrate the potential impact this art initiative could have. It wouldn't just be an experiment, it could transform our approach to education here. Emily froze, her breath hitching. The possibilities hung in the balance. Would they settle on a temporary solution, or could they embrace something deeper? With a new path on the horizon, she felt a surge of both hope and anxiety. Piloting this could pave the way for more permanent changes, Emily replied, adrenaline pushing her words. Yet as she finished, a realization struck her: the risks of this journey were not merely hers to shoulder. She was interwoven with her students' futures, which made the stakes all the more personal. Just then, an unexpected tension from within her swirled anew. She understood that this was not just a debate about finances, it was a fight for recognition, a battle for purpose and belonging in a world that often normalized indifference. As the board members began to discuss logistics, Emily felt a blend of exhilaration and trepidation. She had entered the room as a teacher but was now positioned as an advocate, a realization that began to reshape her identity. With that transformation came the whisper of a deeper question looming ahead: who was she becoming in this unfolding narrative? The weight of that inquiry settled in her thoughts, an anchor as she navigated the uncertain waters of advocacy, and as she left the meeting room, she grasped tightly to the potential of that identity, aware that the real fight had only just begun. What would it take to truly transform not only the program, but herself? The challenge of re-examining her identity as a leader beckoned, a call to redefine the very essence of her role. Emily stepped out of the meeting room, a whirlwind of emotions colliding within her. The boardroom door swung shut behind her with a resounding finality, but the echoes of the conversation lingered like shadows. She had inadvertently crossed a threshold from mere educator to advocate, yet the implication seeded a turbulent mix of hope and fear. The stakes had escalated, and so had her responsibility. As she made her way down the corridor, her thoughts spiraled into introspection. The words of the board, the question of a pilot program, weighed heavily on her mind. Was she equipped to lead this charge? She wondered if she truly had the capabilities to expand this initiative and, simultaneously, manage her own burgeoning identity. The dissonance of expectation and self-doubt reverberated through her, each beat amplifying the anxiety that gnawed at her hope. In the days that followed, Emily absorbed herself in the intricacies of developing the pilot program. Meetings crowded her calendar, strategy sessions with fellow teachers, and discussions with community members who could potentially guide her. Each interaction sculpted her approach, layering depth to her initial ideas, yet the pressure mounted. Amid the excitement of her evolving role, she faced a daunting truth: the lack of concrete experience in advocacy. Was she just an artist-cum-administrator hoping to walk with giants? Doubt trickled into those quiet moments when she sat alone, narrowing her focus to the small details: what budget would be necessary? How could she ensure her students' voices remained central in every decision? As Emily skirted the boundaries of her comfort zone, the unease turned into a catalyst for growth, pushing her to research educational policies and explore models that had borne fruit in similar situations elsewhere. One evening, as she sat at her cluttered kitchen table surrounded by papers and a mug of cooling tea, a realization bloomed. This wasn't merely about art or a pilot initiative, it was about creating a robust framework as essential as any textbook. She began drafting a detailed proposal, one that mapped the intertwining routes of art and education with practical outcomes and measurable success. The pen felt heavy in her hand, but it also carried excitement, a sense of aligning her passion with purpose. After long hours, which turned into days, the document began to take shape. As she wrote, she recognized the reflection of her students in each word, each bullet point a testament to their stories, struggles, and victories, yet despite her burgeoning sense of capability, the anxiety folded back in, creeping up her spine. What if the board felt the pilot program was too ambitious? The what-ifs were a familiar storm she battled, and with each gusting thought came a hypothetical wave of rejection. That fear became the background music of her new reality, a relentless hum that challenged her resolve. As she prepared for the next presentation about the pilot program, the implications of her dual identity as an educator and advocate pressed heavier than before. What did it mean to fight for her students in this new role? Could she balance the expectations placed upon her without losing sight of their needs? She reminded herself of the haunting questions she had faced throughout her life. Each encounter had revealed layers of her identity she hadn't previously understood. The artistry she revered wasn't merely a subject, it had become her armor, her weapon in the battle against apathy, and a lighthouse guiding her down this uncharted path. The night before the big meeting, she found herself pacing her living room, rehearsing aloud. "Tomorrow is about vision, you must embrace it," she told herself, her own words echoing through the quiet space. Emily inhaled deeply, summoning the courage that had distinguished her in that boardroom. This wasn't merely about the pilot program anymore, it was a decisive fork in her journey. As the dawn broke the next day, illuminating each corner of her home, she realized it wasn't only about the outcome of the pilot program, it was about evolving into a force that had the potential to redefine the very landscape of education. With purpose now coursing through her veins, she felt ready to advocate, to champion, but most importantly, to discover who she could truly become in the process. The time had come to face the board once again, but this time she wouldn't only present ideas, she would unveil a vision knit into the fabric of her identity. As she stepped into the light of that new day, she finally understood, real transformation starts from within, and sometimes, fighting for a future means confronting one's own essence. What awaited her in that boardroom, she couldn't quite predict, but one thing was certain, her journey was just beginning, and the whisper of introspection morphed into a clarion call. Would she emerge as the leader her students needed, or would the weight of doubt collide with the promise of her resolve? Emily stood before the towering glass doors of the administrative building, her heart thumping a nervous rhythm in her chest. Today was pivotal. Today she would not only showcase her proposal but also unveil the woman she was becoming, confident yet vulnerable. Stepping inside, the crisp air felt charged with tension. She wasn't just going to advocate for a program, she would advocate for every student who had entrusted her with their dreams. As she entered the boardroom, the familiar long table glared back, utterly intimidating yet strangely comforting. She had imagined this moment countless times, yet nothing could prepare her for the sight of the board members seated with their expectant gazes. Each stern face represented both a gatekeeper and a potential ally. Would they elevate her, or would they further entrench her fears? With each passing moment, Emily fought to maintain her poise. Her proposal was open on her laptop in front of her, brightly highlighted sections reminding her of the core purpose behind every bullet point: the students. She took a deep breath, grounding herself as she launched into her presentation. The words flowed from her, passionate and resolute, emboldened by the stories she carried in her heart. As she spoke about the intertwining of art and education, the board members leaned in with varying degrees of interest. Their expressions flickered, wavering between skepticism and curiosity. Yet, amidst the discussion and questions, Emily sensed a shift. She wasn't just answering questions, she was engaging them, weaving a narrative that included their own experiences. Each member had their motivations, and she could harness them into a shared momentum. But as the session unfolded, the familiar specter of doubt crept in again. A particularly skeptical member raised her eyebrow at one point and asked, "Is this really necessary?" Given our budget constraints, the words hung in the air like a weighty anchor threatening to drag her down. Emily felt her heartbeat quicken, the blood pounding in her ears. Perhaps what could be viewed as a luxury is exactly what we need to foster creativity and innovation among our students, she countered, leaning into the discomfort. We owe it to them to invest in experiences that inspire growth beyond traditional metrics. For the first time in that room, she saw slight shifts in their demeanor. A tentative nod here, a scribbled note there. Hope sparked anew, igniting the subtle determination that she had crafted into her initiative. Real transformation often depends on redefining perspectives, she reminded herself, however. As the meeting concluded, the applause was polite but restrained. Emily smiled, thankful, but she left the room acutely aware that applause does not always equate to approval. The uncertainty loomed again, feeding on her insecurities. What if her words were not enough? As she gathered her belongings, the board's discussions faded into white noise, their lingering doubts weaving a shadow across her accomplishments. Yet, just as she turned to leave, Annie, one of the board members who had been quietly observing, stood. Emily. Her voice was firm yet warm, drawing the attention of the room momentarily. Your approach is different, and maybe that's exactly what we need. The solidarity in Annie's words pierced through the haze of doubt, allowing Emily a moment to breathe. After the meeting, as she walked to her car, the mix of elation and uncertainty coursed through her veins. Annie's encouragement held a new kind of fuel and acknowledgement that her journey was still unfolding. Emily realized that her evolution didn't end here, it continued to rise and fall like a wave, encountering new shores of possibility. She drove home, contemplating the nuances of what it meant to lead, to advocate, and most importantly, to continue discovering her own identity. The fear and excitement coalesced into a driving force. The tide of change was daunting, but it was also inviting. Tomorrow would bring more meetings, more discussions, and perhaps even more challenges. But she understood. Now that each of these interactions was an opportunity to assert her vision, to galvanize support, and to provoke dialogue. As she parked in her driveway and switched off the engine, a thought struck her. Even amid uncertainty, her role as an advocate was forging her not just into a leader, but into someone who could truly shape the future. What innovative strategies would she develop next to surmount the impending challenges? Would she have it in her to transform the board's lingering skepticism into tangible support? Tomorrow awaited with new questions and unfolding narratives, each moment a stepping stone toward discovering who she would ultimately become. Morning arrived with a restless energy. Emily swung her legs over the side of the bed, still replaying the board meeting in her mind. The blend of anticipation and anxiety washed over her, a reminder that she was in uncharted waters. Today was not only about solidifying the previous proposal but also about asserting her presence in an environment that still felt foreign. She rummaged through her closet, selecting a tailored blazer that accentuated her newfound confidence. Even her wardrobe felt different, a direct reflection of her shifting identity. Each piece she donned was a testament to her growth, more assured, more aware of her purpose. Her phone buzzed as she stepped into the kitchen, a reminder of the meeting already scheduled for later that day. This was her chance to address others who had expressed interest in her program, but also an opportunity to confront those who remained skeptical. Emily felt a surge of determination course through her. She wasn't merely selling an idea, she was advocating for change that would ripple far beyond the walls of the boardroom. While sipping her coffee, she pulled out her notes from yesterday's meeting. There was Annie's supportive feedback, a lifeline amidst the opposing views. Emily's mind began to churn with strategies how to utilize her interactions today to clarify her vision and to further engage the stakeholders. Each response needed to build upon the last, uniting doubts with resolution. As the day wore on, she found herself stepping into the next meeting room, taken aback by the physical layout: round tables instead of a long rectangle. This simple change conjured a focus on collaboration rather than confrontation. Taking a deep breath, she reminded herself that she wasn't alone. Each individual at the table shared stakes in the conversation, propelling her conviction forward. The meeting began, and Emily fell into her rhythm. She greeted each member with warmth, gauging their reactions as she shared insights from the proposal that had been discussed. The same skeptics who had questioned her intentions before now leaned in, intrigued by her impassioned delivery. Each nod of acknowledgement scooped away layers of her trepidation, yet, again, doubt lingered in the air. A previously quiet board member interjected, "What's the plan if your proposal doesn't garner the expected results? The risks seem substantial." The question hung heavily before her, the implications weighing on her conscience. She inhaled deeply, embracing the spotlight. Every successful initiative requires a willingness to adapt and evolve, Emily replied, her voice steady. I have built-in checkpoints for evaluation and feedback to ensure that we stay aligned with our goals and can pivot as needed. Without risk, there is no growth. Emily saw her words resonate, flickers of understanding passing through the group. This wasn't merely about her proposal, it was about cultivating a mindset where vulnerability could lead to resilience. The meeting ended with cautious optimism. As she exited, Emily felt lighter, the burden of uncertainty repackaged into the exhilarating prospect of advocacy. Later that night, she sought solace in the gentle hum of her living room. It was quiet, yet it echoed with possibility. She opened her laptop again, this time not to review her proposal, but to draft a plan for what came next. A web of ideas began to take shape: community consultations, workshops, an online forum to gather diverse opinions. But amidst her excitement, her phone pinged with an unexpected message from Annie: "We're gathering feedback tomorrow. Some members are still hesitant. Your presence will be critical." A ripple of dread snaked through her. The wave of support wasn't oceanic, it was patchy, fraught with uncertainties. But this was precisely the moment she had prepared for, where she could confront doubt head-on. What strategy would unravel the last threads of skepticism? Could she manage to unite differing perspectives into a cohesive force? Tomorrow loomed ahead, pregnant with questions, and Emily was ready to answer them with conviction. Emily stood at the precipice of her journey, transformed from a teacher overwhelmed by systemic challenges into a resolute advocate fiercely committed to fostering creativity in her students. The mural project, now completed, symbolized not only the artistic expression of her students but also the united voice she had cultivated within them. The vibrant colors reflected their passions, struggles, and aspirations, layering them in a tapestry of resilience that reverberated throughout the school. As the unveiling day arrived, the air was thick with expectation. Parents, students, and community members gathered, a diverse crowd embodying the very essence of what she had fought for. Emily felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She had harnessed the power of their stories and combined it with strategy, forging a narrative that transcended mere art. She had opened a dialogue with not only the board members but with the entire community. While she stood before the mural, she was no longer just a teacher, she was an authority, someone who had initiated change not through compliance but through conviction. The collective energy of the spectators ignited in her something fierce. Emily knew this was not simply the culmination of a project, but the genesis of a movement. Each student's art represented their unique narratives, and her role was to ensure they took ownership of that story. As she took the stage to address the attendees, her heart surged with a mix of pride and purpose. What we unveil today is more than a mural, it is a manifesto of resilience. Each brushstroke tells a story of overcoming, of voices that matter. The audience's applause was not merely a courtesy, it was an affirmation of the collective struggle she had faced and the shared hope they had embraced. The local media's presence indicated the community's growing interest and support, validating the shift Emily had initiated. Interviews began pouring in, and she found herself sharing not only the successes of her students but also the importance of art in bridging emotional expression and education. Transforming her narrative from a personal plight to a broader advocacy for arts education marked a significant milestone in her career. Days rolled into weeks, and as news of the mural spread, a ripple effect unfolded across the school. Other departments began seeking collaborative projects, inspired by Emily's journey. It created a cultural shift that emphasized creative expression as essential to academic success. She had galvanized the once dubious board into allies, and with their newfound support, funding allocated to arts education began to swell. Through each interaction, Emily felt her confidence solidify. She recognized the strength in her convictions, and her identity as a leader flourished. No longer plagued by doubts, she began proposing new initiatives, securing partnerships with local artists and community organizations to further enhance the program. She returned to the classroom not only as an instructor but as an inspiration. Her students, emboldened by the mural's success, engaged deeply with their projects, each becoming equipped to advocate for themselves. Their enthusiasm spread, inspiring an influx of artistic submissions for a district-wide showcase, a testament to the powers ignited within them. Emily stood back, ready to witness their creations unveil. It was a moment of deep satisfaction, not just a culmination of her efforts, but a celebration of their collective growth. The air brimmed with an unshakable confidence that underscored transformation, not just hers, but theirs too. Finally, at the district meeting that followed the showcase, she stood tall before the board once again, this time fueled by the tangible impact her efforts had produced. The conversations shifted from questioning the necessity of arts education to emphasizing its value. Her voice rang strong as she asserted, "This isn't just about art, it's about reinvigorating our students' engagement and passion for learning." They had confronted her doubts together and emerged victorious. Emily's journey culminated in a realization that echoed in her heart. She had successfully proven that art could be more than an elective, it was a vital part of shaping future generations' identities. She had not only fought for her program, she had sparked a movement embracing creative resilience and inspired countless others in the process. With this victory, art under construction, voices resounding, and futures brightened, Emily had become a beacon of advocacy. Each day now brimmed with the potential for change and progress, sealing her metamorphosis into an educator of influence who transcended her initial fears to claim her rightful legacy. As the dust settled from the launch of her vision, Emily turned to her students, pride washing over her. She had not just achieved, she had conquered her limitations, proving to herself and the world that creating and nurturing voices is where true fulfillment lies. Now is your moment to tap into these transformational stories. Subscribe immediately to our channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about this powerful conclusion, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this inspiring outcome. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Join us in celebrating individual achievements and the power of creativity.